Greetings, Internet. HeiseNerd here, and we are up for another episode of HeiseNerd Speaks, the program where I sit in front of a mic and talk about a few things that might be going through my head for the week. And the items up for this week are the net neutrality repeal, Xbox One leaving itself a little less differentiated from PC gaming, and my thoughts on Star Wars The Last Jedi. All right, so starting off, we're going to talk about net neutrality. Now, I know that this is a hot button topic amongst most YouTubers and most people on the internet right now these days are kind of talking about this. So, for those that don't know about it, net neutrality essentially is legislation that was in place to prevent internet service providers from regulating access to specific internet content by either slowing down access to them or blocking it off completely. Hence the name neutrality, so the entire internet was a neutral zone. On December 14th, the FCC passed legislation that repealed this basically under our noses. We were kind of, as a public, pulled aside and, not made aware of this, and it was kind of done without a whole lot of fanfare, and so this ended up happening. And I think this is basically by what we would consider a corrupt FCC anyway, particularly considering that the head of the FCC right now was formerly a head of Verizon, so an internet service provider. This essentially, with it being repealed, it basically means that internet providers can essentially start charging for content on websites or particular apps. Imagine the idea that you could be charged for web pages and apps just like you would channels on your TV. So if you want the social media package, you have to pay X number of dollars and you get Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, any social media, or the video package, let's say. So you get YouTube and Netflix, which is hilarious because you got to pay for Netflix as a service too. So this is just, I'm gonna rant. This is ridiculous. We are already, as a public, paying out the wazoo for internet service. Right now I pay well over $50 for internet service. Now that does include a few channels, and it's a pretty good connection. But we're already paying this ridiculous amount just to have internet access. Then we're going to have to pay these cherry-picked things if they want to throw those at us too. Now at this rate, they're trying to say that they're not going to, but let's face it, it's in the hands of greedy corporations. They are going to charge for this stuff. I cut the cord for cable earlier this year because I was tired of paying $200 a month for the mixture of internet service and television service. So, we cut the cord with our DirecTV and only have internet, a few channels, and then we have streaming services to save money. Now, I feel like these corporations, these cable, you got to think Comcast or whoever, any of these are losing money out of their cable providing because a lot of people are cutting the cord. And I feel like that they're going to see this and they're going to start using the ability to regulate web content now. I think they're going to use that as a way to make up for this. And it's going to be a ridiculous situation. I guess as far as a solution goes, I would just say that the best thing that you people can do, or we all can do as people, is we can contact our senators, our congressmen, and we can let them know that we do not want to stand for this, and we need to reenact net neutrality, and we need to do it fast because, I mean, as a public, we're just going to lose money hand over fist, and these corporations are going to continue to have money put into their pockets. And anyway, that's my short little political rant for the first part of this section. Second part, actually, I might rant a little bit about this second part too. So, I saw an article today, earlier this morning, that was saying that Microsoft is toying around with the idea of putting out support for keyboard and mouse on their Xbox console, Xbox One, Xbox One X. Um, and I thought about this for a second, and I kind of thought this is also this is also minorly ridiculous, um, for a multitude of reasons. I mean, number one, um, if you're going to be playing online, if you're going to have people with controllers playing against people with keyboard and mouse, the people with keyboard and mouse, once you've really gotten that down, are going to have an unfair advantage. Now, let's back the train up, and people will say, well, anybody can get this and learn how to do it. Well, that's all good and fine. But I don't know about anybody else, but to me, console experience means in front of, maybe not the living room, maybe in another room, whatever, but in front of a larger size TV, sitting down and not being hunched over a keyboard and mouse and playing it. And now I feel like you're really losing that differentiation between the PC gaming experience and console gaming experience. I'm not going to sit here and PC master race because that's not what this is about. Now, I do game on my PC. I do a mixture of both. Essentially, my PC is my console. I mean, I play most of my games with a controller, even first-person shooters. I mean, obviously there are titles that are meant to be played with a keyboard and mouse. And I shouldn't say that because some people would argue with me that first-person shooters on the PC are meant to be played with a keyboard and mouse. But I learned on a controller, and I don't have any intent on learning to play it the other way, and I don't play competitively online anyway. So, at any rate, some games, yeah, meant to play with a mouse and a keyboard. I mean, you're going to play your strategy games like Civilization with a keyboard and mouse. You're going to play Diablo or anything like that with a keyboard and mouse. Now, you can play Diablo with a controller, but I prefer the mouse experience on that. But anyway, I feel like you're really losing that differentiation. At this rate, Microsoft they might as well put Windows 10 as the OS on their consoles, and just package it. It's essentially a PC now. Especially if you put that in there, you could do that. They could totally put Windows 10 into their consoles, and they could put a separate kind of skin for the gaming part of the system. I.e., like big picture mode in Steam. You could do the same sort of thing, and I think that would actually, to be fair, I think that would be a smart move on Microsoft's part, just because then they're getting Windows computers into people's homes that could play games at a pretty reasonable rate. I mean, Xbox One X is going to be cheaper than your gaming PC. Now, granted, you could probably make a pretty good gaming PC that might even, if you shopped around well enough and you did things well enough, you could probably find something that works a little bit better than the Xbox One X at around the same price point. But I digress. Yeah, you're just you're losing that differentiation. Mostly on Microsoft's part. I've not heard any wind of Sony doing the same sort of thing. I think that they kind of are really still geared toward the console experience out of their system. Um, I don't know. I think between this and the fact that this new generation isn't really a new generation, it's essentially just a smaller upgrade so that it could play on 4K and look nicer with both these consoles. It's really slight upgrades. It's essentially you're paying the price of a whole new console to upgrade your graphics card. I mean, if you were going to upgrade your graphics card in your computer, you're going to be spending a lot less than you would on a new console. I don't know. This is a lot of the reason why I went PC gaming. It's like last year it really dawned on me, and that's why I bought my PC last year. My latest gaming PC that's actually it's pretty good for what it is. And I just thought if this is how console gaming is going to go, in most games, except for the handful of exclusives, but I mean, I don't really play a lot of the exclusives that Microsoft and Sony offer anyway. So I was fine with the fact of moving to PC, particularly over the fact that I could just decide to stop, and if I wanted to upgrade, I could just buy components. For instance, I put a new CPU fan in just this summer because the one I had, the stock one, was so ridiculously loud I couldn't stand it anymore. But I mean, just to be able to piecemeal things like that is really nice. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I will say Nintendo. I mean, they're of course differentiating themselves, and they always will. That's going to be a company that they are they are a console handheld gaming company. They aren't trying to blur the line between PC gaming and console gaming. Um, and it's funny. I say the difference between PC gaming there's not a whole lot really, especially with the game selection now. Uh, back in the '90s and back when I was a kid, it was a whole different experience playing on PC and playing on a console. You played a lot more point and click adventure games. Uh, turn-based strategy games were a really big deal on PC, and these were just experiences you didn't really get on home consoles. Um, so I mean, yeah, it was a whole different ball game either way. So I don't know. I feel frustration about this, but I also feel like there's an opportunity here that Microsoft could probably just take and run with it too. So I'm interested to see how this turns out. But that's my little spiel on that. And moving on to our final point for the night. So this one might be the lengthy part, and I wanted to wait to do this one last because this is going to be pretty spoiler heavy. So anybody going forward in this episode, you have been warned. This is spoiler heavy Last Jedi slight review and thoughts. So I went in this movie with a lot of speculations and things like that I kind of talked about last week. I was pretty wrong on most of them. But then again, there are also things that I had speculated and thought about and that haven't really developed. Um, I mean, for instance, I thought that maybe Kylo Ren would be eventually sacrificing himself for Rey. We don't know that. That could happen still. Um, at any rate, so overall, I enjoyed the film. Uh, I really had to think about that when I saw it because there were parts of it I was not happy about at first, and there was also a part of the film that really didn't grab me or keep my attention or really was not that interesting to me, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But overall, uh, after some analysis and thought, I was leaning more toward anywhere between 7 and 8. But I think once I would say that this is a pretty solid 8 to 8.5 out of 10. Not as good as Empire. And nothing ever is going to be. as far as Star Wars goes. I mean, I have yet to find anything that's like that. But I would say sits just as good as Force Awakens and A New Hope. Uh, I think that both of those are pretty, similar as far as my liking and everything goes. Definitely, this is better than the prequels. I think this is better than Rogue One. I'm not a huge Rogue One fan, but I'm not going to go into big detail about that. Um, so overall, 8.5. Major points to really discuss here. I was a big fan of the Kylo Ren, Rey, Luke storyline within this film. It seems like their story was pretty well interconnected, and then you had the side with the Resistance on the run from the First Order, and they were trying to basically keep safe and keep away. And within that, you had the story of Finn and Rose, who is a new character. They essentially have to go to this other planet to find a master code breaker to go with them and sneak onto the main Star Destroyer and turn off their tracking system so they can get away. Anyway, the Luke, Rey, Kylo Ren storyline was fantastic. Basically, in that, I mean, anybody that hasn't seen the film yet or has, or whichever, but it's Rey's trying to get Luke to train her. Luke's resistant to the idea because of his failure with Kylo. While on the side of that, Kylo and Rey have this connection in the Force where they're able to talk to each other from long distance, and they figure out why later. But I think the relationship between Rey and Kylo Ren it's a really interesting one. And if you ask me, I think I thought this from The Force Awakens, and I don't know if they were really alluding to it, but I think that particularly Kylo, and maybe on the side of Rey too, but I think there's an infatuation there. I think Kylo is there is an infatuation of some sort with Rey. I think that, in particular, just for the fact that they're the two young Force users and the only two basically left, except for each other's masters or whatever. But I think that they each want to try to rally the other to their cause. But and also I think that there's an attraction there. At any rate, so I love that storyline, but the Finn and Rose storyline, I just did not feel as interested in, particularly on the fact that by the time they've gotten done with their part, their mission failed anyway. So I felt like, wow, this was almost a complete waste of time. I feel like there was some character development on Finn's part, but I feel like they could have achieved that another way anyway. I don't know. I was a little upset at the fact that you spent all this time in The Force Awakens with Finn and Finn and Rey together, and them developing some sort of a relationship and friendship, and then you kept them separated from each other in the second film. Now, granted, yes, in Empire there was the separation with Luke being separated from the rest of the group, but you had developed characters together in the other group. So you had Leia and Han as out of the main three, because let's face it, the main three are in this film are Rey. I would say Rey, as far as the good guys go, Rey, Finn, Poe Dameron. I feel like it would have made more sense to me on the Finn side of the story to have Poe and Finn go down to this planet and do this together. But instead, Poe is like trying to hold things down on the Resistance their main star cruiser, and trying to gain control there because the person that is in control at the time sucks. And I don't know. I think it would have just made more sense for Ray and for Finn and Poe to be hanging out. I think that would have been a little bit better, and we would have had two characters that we were invested in together, and it would have made way more sense. And maybe that's the biggest part of that. But that's a minor gripe. That's still not like huge. Um, so another major point that kind of gets touched, um, or a major thing that happens in the Rey and Kylo Ren storyline. Eventually, Rey, a la Return of the Jedi, decides that she is going to give herself up to try to win Kylo Ren over to the light side, and gives herself up to be taken in front of Snoke, thinking that Kylo Ren will help her. And when we get to this point in this scene, the chips are down. We think that it's all going to happen, and Kylo Ren betrays his master, kills Snoke. And there were so many things that ran through my head when this happened. Number one, I mean, it was just the shock of, whoa, holy crap, they did it. The second thing was, I mean, because after this, there's a scene where Rey and Kylo Ren are fighting together against Snoke's guards, and I'm like, wow, they're fighting together. This is really awesome. And I'm sitting here thinking, what in the world's going to happen now? I mean, they just killed the bad guy. Who's going to be the bad guy now for like this 3-minute period? And it didn't even dawn on me of the fact that, oh, of course, this is not Kylo betraying his master because he has decided to side with good. It's him betraying his master because he's tired of being treated like garbage by him, and he has decided to take his own path of being the leader and being the bad guy. And that's what we find out after they destroy the guards, that Kylo's like, no, we're burning it all down. The Sith, the Jedi, all of it. We start our own thing, and we rule this galaxy together as Force users, basically. And Rey's, no, not at all. But okay, so anyway, on the Snoke death situation I'm talking about, I was walking out of the theater really ticked off about that first, because we've spent so much time kind of speculating, okay, well, who is Snoke? What's his origin story? Where does he come from? And I was just really irritated. It's like, wow, we just took this and threw it away. Who cares now? And I could talk about my resolution to that in a second, because there's another thing that irritated, because right after Snoke was killed and Rey and Kylo were kind of having their bit afterwards about, you know, Kylo's like, come to my side. He basically told her, you know where you come from, you know where your parents are, or who your parents are. It's deep inside of you and you're denying it. And basically he tells her that her family came from nothing. They were junkies that dumped her off. They were nobodies. Which, again, people were speculating, well, who's Rey's parents? Where does Rey come from? Is she a Kenobi? Is she a Skywalker? Is she Emperor Palpatine's daughter? I mean, there were so many different fan theories. And then this is another thing that is just like, oh, no, throw it away. Who cares? And I thought, again, well, this is irritating. You know, I mean, we figured she probably came from somewhere. I wasn't as irritated about this as about the Snoke thing. But then, this is where people are getting irritated about the film in the first place. And where I think a lot of these bad user reviews are coming from is just because people have spent so much time speculating about these things and hashing out, and then when the things don't turn out the way they want them to, they get ticked off and put a bad review up. Which is, that doesn't make the movie a bad movie. But at any rate, I was irritated about it. But after I gave it thought, and especially after I read some different articles about why they did it, and I did some thinking about it. But if you think about it, if you think about Snoke in the same lines you were thinking about the Emperor in the Return of the Jedi, is in the original trilogy, we didn't know the Emperor's backstory. We didn't even know his name if you were just going by the films by themselves and no other literature or anything like that. He's just the Emperor. You didn't even know his name was Palpatine until later. If you were going by the films, you didn't know until you actually watched episode 1, or you didn't. Yeah, you didn't know that. So it's really no different than as it is with Snoke. So there's not to say that we aren't going to get some supplemental material that's going to give us Snoke's backstory somewhere down the line, whether that's a book or a comic book. Disney wants to make money off of this franchise. They're going to do what they can to make money off this franchise. So if they want these diehard fans to learn about these characters and their backstories, well, guess what? You need to buy the supplemental material and the expanded stuff to be able to understand what's going on with them. It's as simple as that. And I think that's a fine move on their part now that I think about it. On the part of Rey's lineage, I don't think it's really necessary to worry about where Rey's lineage came from. We don't need a prequel about Rey's parents. We already know what happens when we try to make prequel movies in the Star Wars universe, so that's okay. The more I think about it, we don't need to know that. And the idea to know that I like this because you're throwing away the idea that you have to come from something or some bloodline to be a effective Jedi or effective in the Force. No, it throws the idea out that maybe just some people can be born with it innate in their system. And we see that in Rey, and we also see that at the end sequence. There's a young boy, slave boy on Canto Bight, the planet that Finn and Rose went to, that obviously is showing off some abilities in the Force too. So it's the idea that we could continue this story without being chained to the Skywalker lineage. And that, I don't really care if that irritates people. I feel like that particularly that fans are really just kind of being overly critical of this film. I mean, for this to have a user score on Rotten Tomatoes that is lower than Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, it's ridiculous to me. Honestly, are you going to really tell me that this film is worse than Attack of the Clones? Attack of the Clones is probably the most boring Star Wars movie I've watched. There's a few exciting scenes, but in between it, nothing happens, and the dialogue is terrible. So, I mean, I could go back and forth with anybody on that film. That's the worst Star Wars film there is. I hate Attack of the Clones. But I just think that people really need to just sit back, kind of calm down, and think about this film instead of initially getting so upset, jumping onto Rotten Tomatoes and making that bad review. You got to digest it. You got to digest it before you go in and make your final call on this. That's what I thought when I first saw it. I was upset about things, but I even said that I was to myself, like, I'm going to let this digest. I'm going to sit back and analyze why this is all about, why this is coming about, and give my proper assessment of it later. And so that kind of led me to, giving those second thoughts and understanding the vision that Ryan Johnson kind of had. Um, I don't know. I Between the Rotten Tomatoes score and user score and the fact that there are people petitioning to have this movie removed from canon is just it's illogical. I think that people just gotta really calm down. Um, I mean, this is worse than backlash than when Attack of the Clones came out. Now, granted, the internet was not near as strong of a sounding board, back in 2002, but it doesn't matter. I just feel like that this is a film that uh, it's good. I mean, there's a reason why it has a good critical score. The critical score is sitting at like in the mid 90s. That's a good film. Go see this film. It's a good film. There's no reason to not watch it in the theater and really just kind of, especially now that you have an idea. I mean, if you've been watching the internet and you haven't seen this yet, I don't know how you haven't been spoiled about the film. That's amazing. But yeah, I mean, go see this. You kind of get an idea of what's going on now, and you can look at that and analyze it and think about what it means for the future of this franchise. If you were really chained to the Skywalker lineage, it would get too one-sided and too boring. I think it's exciting to know that we can get a little bit more uh just a new story. I mean, we got to get a fresh start on what I mean, I like the idea of the fact that it might be, the Force is the Force. There's not, I mean, there's the use of it for good and there's a use of it for bad. And if you're using it for your selfish purposes, then you're a bad person using the Force. If you're using it for your good purposes, you're using it as a good person. And I don't know. I like that just because it's like, okay, well, now maybe there might be some abilities that are usually chained to the bad side that a light side user could use. I mean, I don't see what would be wrong with, like, a light Jedi throwing down some lightning on, one of the bad Jedi. I mean, why does it need to be chained? I like this idea. Um, and I also, okay, another rant. I'm tired of fans thinking that they have the knowledge to know what the Force can do and what the Force can't do. The canon is the slate was wiped clean when Disney took over. If somebody making a Star Wars film under their banner wants to make the Force do something and they can put it into script, guess what? The Force can do that. If it means that you can artificially project yourself across a galaxy, sure, you could do that now. It'll kill you in the process, but you can do that if you're powerful enough. I don't see why there's any reason for people to be so self-absorbed in their fandom to think that, oh, you can't do that. That's horrible. Who are you to say that that's it? Did you write this script? Did you do? No, you didn't. So guess what? The Force can do that. And if you don't like that, well, that's your opinion. But I guess that if fans want to be so self-righteous about Star Wars and they don't like what Disney's doing to it, well, they're going to have to either get over it or they're going to have to move on. Pick another franchise to get in love with. I mean, that's just how I feel about it. It's a short rant there, but anyway. So, closing thoughts, I'll just say, Last Jedi, in the end, I'm going to say this is a good movie. And I would be glad to actually get in and see it again, especially with the new visual, new vision that I've kind of got of it. So I think it'd be a good idea to do that probably before it leaves the theaters. So probably get in and do that. Yeah, like I said, recommend it for anybody, and I would like to see it again too. Solid 8.5, good film. All right. Well, we're just going to be closing off here because we have hit all three of our topics for this week. Again, thank you for listening. And thank you to anybody that's kind of watched. I know I've got a couple new Let's Plays going on now. And I enjoy being able to do those for you guys. And I really am enjoying any new subscribers. And again, I enjoy any feedback that you guys can give me too. So like, comment, subscribe on this and any other videos on my page. And I do appreciate all of you guys. And I will catch everybody on the next episode. HeiseNerd out.